and next we output the entity, the player. So this actually does override this, and it goes into player.cpp in here. So you can just see here something similar to the last one. Instead of inputting, we're outputting the name, the password, rank, and most of that stuff's pretty self-explanatory. So now I'll just go back to logon logon.c++ where we were. So after adding the player to the database, it calls go-to-game true. Oh yeah, and when we call go-to-game, we pass in true to tell the server that it's a new player that we're logging on, so we can go through the tutorial stage. And next we output the entity, the player. So this actually does override this, and it goes into player.cpp in here. So you can just see here something similar to the last one. Instead of inputting, we're outputting the name, the password, rank, and most of that stuff's pretty self-explanatory. So now I'll just go back to logon.c++ where we were. So after adding the player to the database, it calls go-to-game true. Oh yeah, and when we call go-to-game, we pass in true to tell the server that it's a new player that we're logging on, so we can go through the tutorial stage. Okay, so first we need a reference to the player. So we use findFull from the player database. We pass in the name, and it'll return us the entity we need, and then we just dereference it. So first of all, it will check if the player is already logged in. Our player isn't logged in at the moment since we just created him, but this is just to prevent, say, double logging in. So if we were double logged in, we'd close all the close the connection, get rid of the handler, hang it up, and clear all the handlers. Seeing as we're a newbie, we've passed in true into newbie, so we are. We record the connection in p.con, which sets the m_connection in the player equal to the connection we've received from the client. So it stores it. So we can send a message to the player at any time, as long as they're connected. So then we remove the handler the connection had, which in this case it was log on, so we're going to remove that and add the game handler instead, passing in the player's connection and the player ID. And then this will bring us to the main part of the game where the player can send in their commands. Okay, so just before I move on to the game handler, there are a few more things I wanted to say about the logon handler. So, one of them is that before the handle function of the handler is called, the enter function is called. So anytime someone enters the handler, the enter function is called. So when this enter function is called of the logon handler, we simply output the IP address and say that they've entered the login state to the log file, and then we send in a message back to the client, telling them that they've logged on to simple mode and they've connected to simple mode and please enter your name. And then next it'll bring us to the logon handler where we're waiting on their input. Okay, now the other thing I wanted to say is that so far on this handler all I've gone through is creating a new user, and then that logs them in. So otherwise, if we come to the handler and we already have a user and we want to log in, it'll come in, go into new connection because the user hasn't entered anything yet, and instead of being new, they'll enter their username. So all this does is then again it finds the player out of the database. If it's not the one at the end, we go on, we set the state so that we're next going to be entering the password. The temporary name equals to the player's name, and temporary password equals to the player's password. This is so we can check the password against their input next time. And we send a message back to them asking them to enter their password. So then the next time they send a message to the server, it's going to, instead of enter new pass, we're going to go down to enter pass. And this just simply checks if their information that they passed in this time is the same as their password. It then sends them a message back saying they've entered the realm, and we call go to game. This time we don't pass in true because it's not a new user. So that's it for the logon handler. So now I'm going to move on to the game handler. Okay, so when the game handler is called, it's first going to look for the enter function. If I could find it. There. So here we see something similar to the logon enter. So it's pretty much just output the log file that the user has entered the game. We have m_last command, just pretty much initializing it so we don't get an error when we try to when the user tries to send a / command, so that it'll enter the last function. At least that's what I'm pretty sure it's for. We can see here that we have to set p equal to the static player that we are using. So when we create a new game object, you may remember that we passed in the player ID into the game constructor. So if I go to game. I should just right click and go to you can see here in the game constructor we've passed in the connection, but here it says player p_player. This is actually a database pointer that uses the player ID to return a player. So when we pass in the ID, you return the player object. So we can set the static player to the player we found. Okay, so we have our player reference. We set that it's active, and we set that it's now logged in. And we send a message to all the players in the game that so and so has entered the RAM. And all sendGame does is it iterates through the database and sends them all a string. So I'll actually give you a look at that. It's pretty much just start at the player.begin, go to player.end, and send a string if they're active in the game. We've got a similar thing up here where send global, but that's just if that's everyone who's connected to it and not just within the game. And enter. And then after that, if it's not a new player, it would just go to the game handler. But since we are a newbie in this one, we're going to go to the to the training method, which all it does is it sends the player to a new handler, which is the training handler. So we're just going to say we're leaving this one, we're going to train. Again, the training constructor does the same thing as the game constructor did. It passes in the ID, we get the pointer and we get the player back. So if I go to train.c++, there we go. Go down to enter. So when we enter the train handler, it comes in here and it's something similar to the last one again. We come in, we get a reference to the player. We set that it's not active because we are now in the training stage. This is basically just so that any chat messages, like we can't whisper to the person and they can't see our chat messages and things like that. So it checks it just makes sure we're a new person. It sends a string that the kind of welcome to the game, and you're going to have to set up your character basically. And then it said congratulations, you're no longer a newbie. After that, it prints the stats of your player. So that's pretty simple. It's just something to output to the player stats to the screen. It's like we're going to send them a string with their name, their level, stat points, strength, health, and agility. But what the interesting thing here is that we're going to have a boolean check if we need to clear the screen, and if we do, we send the command to clear the screen to the Telnet client. And we have this in because we're going to be using print stats for every time they update a stat. So after that, the enter function's finished, so we go up to the handle. So the first thing is we take their input and we get the first command using parse word. This basically gets rid of the white space at the start and end of the input string, and then finds the first word. So basically from the very first position to the first space, and then that returns that. It's our first command. So then it turns it into lowercase. Next, we just check if the command was quit. If it was, it saves the player, something we've gone over before, and removes this handler from the player, meaning they're going to quit the training stage, and it then returns. This will bring them then into the game handler. So seeing as we've still got stats to do, we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to update our character stats. So what this basically does is it allows the user to choose which stat they want to add 1 to, which we can see if I go down to the print stats. It says enter 1, 2 or 3 and add a stat point to basically to your stats. So we come in, we take the first character of the input command. If it's 1, if it's greater than or equal to 1 and less than or equal to 3, we can go in here. If we've still got stat points left to put in, our stat points are minused, and then we can add the stat point to a base attribute. So this n-1 is the attribute we want to put into, so 0, 1 or 2, and how much to put into it. So the actual attributes are really just an array of integers, and if you want to look at how the attributes adds them to it, I'll just show you them here. We've passed in the attribute we want to change, which is between 0, 1 and 2, and the value we want it to be. We want to add to it, sorry. Although I said it's an array of integers, this isn't actually an integer in this, it's an attribute set that's overridden the open and close braces, these ones here, to work similar to an array. So it's actually an object that has an integer array the size of the number of attributes the player has, but we're only setting 1 to 0, 1 or 2. There's the overriding the operator so that it works like a normal array. But the main reason we've got a new object instead of just using an integer array so that we can overwrite the output and input streams and make it easier to work with for our game. So I'll just close all these and get back to it. Again, after you've added your stat, it just recalls print stats, and then goes back again up to the top handle for them to add all their stats. And whenever all their stats are added, the player will enter quit, which will return them to the game handler. Okay, to move back up to the game handler. Now, after you've gone through your training stage, or you're just logging in as a normal user who isn't a new player, you come to this handler. Again, we get a reference to the player for easiness sake. We check if the command they've sent in is just a /, and if it is, we set the command equal to the last command that they've used. This is just to provide them with something easy so that they don't have to type a command in over and over again if they want to do the same things. Like it'd be really boring to have to type in attack every time you want to attack if you're just going to attack about 3 times. If it isn't the /, it just sets the last command equal to the command we sent in this time. Here we get the first command again. We parse the data, we get the very first command passed in, and we convert it to lowercase, so we've got our first word. And the next is we just run through all the possible commands that they could have entered and deal with them in whatever way we need to, such as if chat was entered or if they've just typed in something and pressed enter, then we're going to remove the first word, which would be either chat or semicolons from P data, and then we're going to send the rest of the message, whatever they wanted to chat, with their name chats appended to the start of the message to all of the players who are in the game. If they haven't entered the chat command, if it's experience or exp, we send them a string of the experience, their character's experience. It's similar for a lot of the things here. Help pretty much just puts a string to sends a string to the. Sorry, print help gets a string back to just listing all the commands that they can do. So this is the normal help commands. These are the God help commands and the administrator help commands, and then it pretty much just depending on the rank, it outputs either of them appended to the other one. So like the administrator can do all of them, the God can only do the normal help and the God, and the other one can only do the help. I'll just run through a few more of these. I suppose I'll jump down to some of the ones that are a bit different, such as whisper.